Chuck Norris died recently, and really, unless you are a member of his family or a friend and you liked or loved him on a personal basis, his death isn't something to be sad about. I say that for a couple reasons. First, dude was 86. He wasn't cut down in his prime. He died old and he died rich. And he had a good run. A better run than most people ever get. Second, his politics and views on social issues were pretty abysmal. He was a Christian and not the let's love everybody and feed the hungry and work to make the world a better place kind of Christian, more the let's elect Donald Trump so he can kick out all the Mexicans and remind the black folks who's in charge kind. Before he backed Trump, he supported Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee and Ron Paul. He was a longtime friend and supporter of Benjamin Netanyahu and Netanyahu's government in Israel. He endorsed the conspiracy theory about President Obama's birth certificate. He supported the U.S. Senate campaign of former Alabama Supreme Court Justice and religious zealot Roy Moore. He was a gun nut. He supported Proposition 8, the ballot measure that banned same-sex marriage in California. I could go on, but you get the idea. I'm not saying he was pure evil. He used the fame and wealth he accumulated over his life to do some good things too. He supported the Make-A-Wish Foundation. He raised awareness for problems faced by military veterans. He donated to projects that helped HIV/AIDS patients in India. I don't want to take any of that away from him. That's part of his legacy. But so is all that stuff I mentioned before. And that stuff, opposing same-sex marriage, promoting one religious extremist and far-right candidate after another, that did damage, which I, for one, found disappointing because like many other American men who were American boys in the 1980s, I had a Chuck Norris phase. I think it might have been an offshoot of my Karate Kid phase, which started shortly before and flowed directly into the Chuck Norris phase. I never had a serious, lasting interest in martial arts, but I was into the Karate Kid and Chuck Norris enough at one point that I took a karate class. One karate class that lasted a few weeks, and after that I must have decided that I'd learned all the martial arts I needed or wanted because I never went back to take the next level, or however it works, I don't even know. My introduction to Chuck Norris was the animated series Chuck Norris Karate Commandos. That's Karate Commandos with 2 Ks. You know, if they'd called it Chuck Norris Karate Commando Corps with 3 Ks, never mind. I was shocked to learn as an adult that the Chuck Norris cartoon only produced 5 episodes. 5 episodes! They made action figures for it. I had the action figures. I loved them. A few months after the Chuck Norris cartoon debuted on TV, the movie Firewalker, starring Chuck Norris and Louis Gossett Jr., opened in theaters, and I bullied my mom into taking me to see it. I loved it. I was definitely a Chuck Norris fan. Looking back on that time in my life, I think I understand why. I didn't know or care much about politics. It never occurred to me to even wonder who Chuck Norris voted for or what his personal beliefs were. Judging by his movies and that cartoon, he didn't seem to have many personal beliefs. Norris's on-screen persona, which never varied from project to project, embodied stoic, uncomplicated masculinity. He lived by a code, a black and white morality. There was right and there was wrong, good and bad. America was good, and people that didn't like America were bad. My Chuck Norris phase came and went, and it wasn't until decades later that I finally watched the movies that actually made him a star, the series of B-grade actioners that he made for Cannon in the 1980s, Missing in Action, The Delta Force, and my personal favorite, Lone Wolf McQuade. Norris's Cannon movies are schlocky, jingoistic, xenophobic, and unintentionally hilarious, which is great because that's the only thing that makes them watchable. One of my writing teachers in college was a studio executive for Cannon in the 1980s and worked with Norris. He told us in class one day that it was him who pitched the line, "I don't step on toes, I step on necks," during the filming of Braddock. But he meant it as a joke. He never expected that they would actually use the line in the film. My writing teacher also told us that he once said to Norris, "You know, Chuck, it's a shame they don't give out an Oscar for Best Actor while holding an inanimate object, because if they did, you'd win it every year." He was right. Norris did have an undeniable charisma with a machine gun in his hand, though that was probably mostly the gun. I never watched Walker, Texas Ranger. I've still not seen it, apart from an odd episode here and there and the out-of-context clips Conan used to play on late night. Maybe I'll catch up on it one of these days, given my taste for enjoyably shitty TV shows. I'd probably love it. There were two other Chuck Norris movies that I remembered from my childhood/adolescence but never saw. Sidekicks, which came out in 1992, and Top Dog, which came out in 1995. I was aware of both films at the time, but made no effort to see them because by then I had long since outgrown my Chuck Norris phase, which began when I was 6 and lasted until I was a slightly older 6. I finally watched them both just recently, and they were... Actually, I think interesting might be putting it too strongly. I have thoughts. I'll put it that way. One thing that both Sidekicks and Top Dog reminded me of that I had kind of forgotten, since it had been a while since I watched any Chuck Norris movies, was how flagrantly derivative many, if not most, of Norris's films were. Missing in Action was a Rambo knockoff. Firewalker was a B-grade adventure movie in the mold of Romancing the Stone, which had been a hit a couple of years before. The Delta Force was inspired by a real-life plane hijacking in 1985 and also by the 1976 Entebbe raid, which had previously been the subject of two other films, including one, Operation Thunderbolt, directed by Menachem Golan, who also directed The Delta Force. Sidekicks, mostly cribs from The Karate Kid, and Top Dog is a buddy cop dog movie in the mold of Turner and Hooch and K-9. In the 80s and 90s, if you were a moviegoer and there was a popular film you wanted to see a cheaper, shittier version of, Chuck Norris was your guy. When I say Sidekicks, cribs from The Karate Kid, what I mean is Sidekicks is The Karate Kid. Only the producers fiddled with the dials to make it just different enough so that they wouldn't get sued. Instead of a single mom, like Daniel in The Karate Kid, the hero of Sidekicks has a single dad. Instead of a karate teacher who works as a maintenance man, he has a karate teacher who works as a cook in a Chinese restaurant. Instead of taking place in Southern California, it takes place in Houston, Texas. And also Chuck Norris is in it, playing himself. Jonathan Brandis, in the same year he also starred in Ladybugs with Rodney Dangerfield, and a year away from the start of his role as a regular on Sequest, stars as Barry, a lonely kid with asthma who spends his time fantasizing about going on adventures with his hero, Chuck Norris. Barry's imagination frequently runs away with him, and as a result, his performance in school suffers. He is bullied by his classmates, and he's too shy to talk to the girl he likes. Then, Barry's dad gets a brilliant idea. Since Barry is interested in martial arts through his Chuck Norris fandom, maybe he should take a karate class. So they drop by the dojo of Sensei Sensei Stone. But that doesn't go well. Stone rejects Barry as a weakling and also insults Barry's idol Chuck Norris. Stone claims that Norris fears him, and that's why Norris no longer competes in karate tournaments. Not because he's a wealthy actor and also a man in his early 50s. So instead, Barry starts taking karate lessons from Mr. Lee, the uncle of his favorite teacher, Ms. Chan. And they do, all the Karate Kid stuff, and as a result of the training, Barry grows stronger and gains confidence, while continuing to regularly daydream himself into assorted action movie scenarios alongside Chuck Norris. And eventually things come to a head at a local karate tournament, where Barry, Mr. Lee, and Miss Chan form an ad hoc dojo to compete against Sensei Stone's students, which include Randy, Barry's #1 bully. But oh no, there's a problem. To compete in the tournament, you need 4 people. And Barry, Mr. Lee, and Ms. Chan only have 3. What are they gonna do? Luckily, Chuck Norris, the real Chuck Norris, just so happens to be attending this tournament, and Lee and Chan talk him into joining their team, which Chuck Norris is happy to do to help out his biggest fan Barry and also teach a lesson to that loudmouth Sensei Stone. And the movie has most definitely not been good up to this point, but once they get to the karate competition, whatever little Sidekicks had going for it just totally falls apart. It turns out this karate competition isn't a fighting tournament, but more of a skills exhibition. Barry doesn't fight his bully Randy. Instead, Barry competes in the weapons handling round and shows off his skills with nunchucks. Mr. Lee breaks concrete blocks, and Miss Chan performs a kata. Only their newest team member, Chuck Norris, does any fighting. He squares off against Sensei Stone and effortlessly makes a fool of him. The character of Sensei Stone is a problem unto himself. Played by Joe Piscopo, an actor seldom noted for his subtlety or restraint, he is a cartoon. This is more of an issue than it should be because after he rejects Barry from his karate class, Stone becomes a recurring nemesis in Barry's Chuck Norris fantasies, one of which is in horrifically bad taste featuring Piscopo playing Stone as a racist caricature of an Asian person, the sort of thing that was inexcusable when Mickey Rooney did it in 1961, and even more so here in 1992. The reason this is an issue, in addition to the racism of that particular segment, is that when the real Chuck Norris finally fights the real Sensei Stone in the tournament, Stone is no less an over-the-top buffoon than he is in Barry's fantasies, which just makes the entire movie feel like it's been a shallow and witless project. Which, I mean, I'll give the filmmakers this much credit as far as the portrayal of Sensei Stone in and out of Barry's fantasy episodes. They're consistent. In real life and in Barry's imagination, Stone is a wacky, mugging clown, and Chuck Norris is an uncharismatic block of wood. Sensei Stone-related issues aside, on one level I get it. The movie is derivative of The Karate Kid enough already, and maybe the producers thought switching things up a little and having the big tournament at the end be something other than a straight fighting competition would help to set their movie apart. But it's just not very dramatically compelling the way they do it here. The only characters who actually fight are Chuck Norris and the evil sensei, neither of whom have played much of a role in the story up to this point. Norris, the real Norris, not Barry's fantasy version, has been completely absent for the entire film. Imagine if, instead of fighting Johnny in the tournament, the Karate Kid had ended with Mr. Miyagi fighting Sensei Kreese, while Daniel merely demonstrated how good he was at catching flies with chopsticks. Actually, it's even worse than that. Imagine Daniel demonstrating his chopsticks fly-catching skills while Sensei Kreese fought Mr. Miyagi's old friend Chuck Norris. Things do get mildly interesting at the end of the tournament when Sensei Stone's team and Barry's team end up tied, and Barry does finally directly face off with his bully Randy in the tiebreaker round. Only instead of fighting, they have a block-breaking contest. And Barry wins. Yay? The movie ends with Barry and Chuck Norris sitting alone on a bench outside the tournament venue. Barry thanks Chuck. Chuck gives him some bland platitude about how your dreams can come true if you work hard enough, and then suddenly Chuck Norris is gone, implying that the Norris Barry was talking to just now was his imaginary friend version of Chuck Norris, not the real guy. So what happened to the real Chuck Norris? The one who spoke to Mr. Lee and Miss Chan, the one who joined their team and fought Stone in the tournament. Did he just leave without even saying goodbye to Barry? What a dick. Even in a movie built around the idea that he is a larger-than-life hero to a lonely child, Chuck Norris manages to come across as a huge asshole. Barry gets up off the bench to go join his dad and Miss Chan and leaves his prized Chuck Norris magazine behind because I guess Barry has reached the end of his Chuck Norris phase. As the film ends, we see another kid find the Chuck Norris magazine. A kid in a wheelchair, because inspirational, I guess. One thing I will say for this movie, as awful as it is, the supporting cast is stacked. Beau Bridges as Barry's dad, Julia Nixon as Miss Chan, Mako as Mr. Lee, Danica McKellar as Lauren, the girl Barry likes, Richard Mole as the gym teacher, and Garrett Graham as the asshole English teacher. And you know what? There is one scene where Chuck Norris is actually pretty good. And my old writing teacher's observation holds true because in the scene, Norris is holding a rope, which is an inanimate object. It's the scene where Barry is struggling to climb a rope in gym class, and he imagines Chuck Norris next to him on another rope, teaching him how to climb and encouraging him. For a couple of minutes, Chuck Norris seems likable and engaging. He comes across as legitimately caring and invested in Barry and helping him up the rope. He pushes Barry, but supportively, not in a bullying way. Maybe it's because his job before he became an actor was a martial arts instructor, and he was able to tap into some sense memory from when he was a coach and a teacher. But for that scene, Chuck Norris does all right. He's natural and believable and, credible as a human being with emotions and social skills. It's a nice change of pace from the rest of Norris's scenes, where he's really good at punching and kicking, but so hopeless with dialogue that he can't even threaten people convincingly. Sidekicks is a bad movie, but at least its existence is somewhat explicable. For all his limitations as an actor, Chuck Norris was good in a fight scene, and the action schlock that he cranked out in the 1980s was appealing to kids who didn't care about the plot or the shitty politics those films contained. They just wanted to see Chuck Norris whip some ass. With that in mind, Sidekicks makes sense. Chuck Norris teaming up, sort of, with a kid who represents his young fans. I know of nothing rational, however, that can explain the existence of Top Dog. As I previously mentioned, Top Dog is a buddy cop dog movie, which means it's a comedy, starring Chuck Norris. And if you haven't seen the movie, you might think, well, okay, it's not the genre to which he's the most obviously suited, but maybe he makes fun of himself and his typical screen persona. No, he doesn't. That's not what he does. You might also think, I bet he's the straight man. That's the part he plays in the comedy. Nope. He's not spoofing himself. He's not the straight man. He's not doing some Leslie Nielsen-esque guy who's oblivious to the funny stuff thing. He's just Chuck Norris. And his default mode in Top Dog is annoyed. Not angry, not exasperated, not tense, not about to blow his top if he has to put up with any more shenanigans. Annoyed. Like he doesn't want to be there. Like the character he's playing doesn't want to be doing any of the things he's doing, and Chuck Norris, the actor, doesn't want to be doing this movie. I have no idea if that was actually the case. I'm just saying that's how it comes across. We see a good bit of Top Dog before Norris ever even shows up. There's a lengthy prologue that centers on Sergeant Lou Swanson, played by veteran character actor Carmine Caridi, who you might recognize from The Godfather Part 2, or NYPD Blue, or the headlines from 2004 when he was busted for sharing screeners of dozens of films and became the first person ever to be expelled from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Actually, before we meet Lou, and way before we see Chuck Norris for the first time, we meet the villains of the piece, a gang of neo-Nazi terrorists who have been carrying out terrorist attacks against minority groups. Remember when you could make modern-day Nazis the villains in a movie, and there wouldn't be a million identical dipshits screeching about it online and claiming it demonized white people? Even better, remember when conservatives like Chuck Norris were publicly anti-Nazi? And we didn't consider that noteworthy because, who wouldn't be anti-Nazi? Anyway, Reno, the top dog alluded to in the title of the film, belongs to Lou, and Reno is apparently the greatest police dog ever. He's apparently been cross-trained as a drug-sniffing dog, and a rescue dog, and an attack dog, and probably half a dozen other things too. Despite all of this training, he is terrible at obeying orders and spends most of the movie doing whatever he wants, not what his human handlers tell him to do. In a better, more self-aware movie, this could have been a funny idea. Take the cliche of the loose cannon cop who plays by his own rules and make them a dog. There's potential there, right? Hey, maybe they could have cast Chuck Norris against type and made him the uptight, by-the-book sort of cop to lean into his naturally stiff and humorless on-screen persona. Might that have been something? Alas, we will never know because Top Dog is not that better, more self-aware movie. Top Dog is Top Dog. And in Top Dog, poor old Lou gets killed by the neo-Nazis he's investigating, and heroic yet disobedient police dog Reno gets partnered with Jake Wilder, played by Norris. Wilder is a typical Norris character, a cop who is also a master martial artist for unspecified reasons. The movie also seems to want us to think that he's a slob, but he seems more like just a little untidy. Like, his house isn't clean and neatly arranged, but it's not the sort of place you'd see on Hoarders either. That's why the gag where Reno walks in, takes a look around, and then immediately runs back outside to sleep in the car falls flat. all of the gags fall flat because they're all obvious, one-dimensional, and poorly conceived, but the fact that it's an utter failure as a comedy isn't the worst part about Top Dog, which is a rare quality. Because in most cases, I'd say a failed comedy is just about the worst thing a movie can be. Worse than Top Dog's inept comedy is the decision of its creators to center it on an investigation of violent white nationalists. Not because violent white nationalists aren't suited to be villains, they're suited to be nothing else, but because they aren't suited to be the villains of this movie. This is a silly cop dog movie. And the villains are a gang of violent neo-Nazis who are bombing apartment buildings where black and brown people live and planning an even bigger terrorist attack at an upcoming racial unity conference. That's a little heavy for a silly cop dog movie. Not only that, at one point we see a meeting of these violent neo-Nazis, and their leadership includes representatives from such organizations as the Ku Klux Klan, the Aryan Nations, and the Church of the Creator, which I hopefully don't need to tell you are all actual, real-life white supremacist groups. That's a lot heavy for a silly cop dog movie. The neo-Nazi villains aren't portrayed as buffoons, aren't presented comedically at all. They're played completely straight. Again, fine. Maybe not the right villains for the silly cop dog movie. Perhaps the filmmakers thought making fun of the neo-Nazis in their movie would soften them, create the impression that real neo-Nazis were less of a threat. I don't know, but I know what does create the impression that real neo-Nazis are less of a threat: showing them committing racist acts of terrorism in a silly cop dog movie. As the movie shuffles along, everything that you expect to happen happens. Wilder starts out not liking the dog, then the dog proves himself to Wilder and they become pals, then they thwart the big neo-Nazi terrorist plot, save the day, and catch the one who killed Lou. It is satisfying on a very basic level seeing Chuck Norris kick the shit out of a room full of Nazis. Too bad he wasn't as determined to be anti-Nazi when the time came to endorse political candidates. There is one scene that almost works. And of course, in this movie where the hook is a cop teaming up with a dog, it's one of the scenes that doesn't have the dog in it at all. A few times throughout the film, Wilder looks in on his elderly mother. Did they add these scenes to humanize Wilder and give us at least one reason to think he was something other than a miserable, disagreeable bastard? I'd prefer not to speculate as to the thought processes that went into the creative decisions that resulted in Top Dog, but in one scene, Wilder is helping his mother plant a tree in her backyard. As he digs the hole, he talks over the investigation into the neo-Nazi group with his mother. He mentions that he knows the Nazis are planning another terrorist attack soon, but he doesn't know where or when. Then Wilder's mom says, "Well, April 20th is tomorrow, what about then?" Wilder's like, "What's April 20th? And Mom says, "Hitler's birthday." The movie isn't quite smart enough to have Wilder ask his mother how she happens to know off the top of her head when Hitler's birthday is. He just asks her if she's sure that tomorrow is Hitler's birthday, and she says, "Well, of course, it's in all the history books." And then Wilder runs off to share this stunning information with the other cops who are also investigating this gang of neo-Nazis. It's not a great scene, but there is at least something mildly absurd about this grim, no-nonsense cop taking time away from his very important investigation to go plant a tree for his mom. It's also accidentally funny, almost, that none of the law enforcement professionals working this case seem to have imagined the neo-Nazi terrorists they were chasing might be planning something for Hitler's birthday. Mildly absurd and almost accidentally funny are the best you're going to get from this one. Speaking of Hitler's birthday, Top Dog opened in theaters on April 28, 1995, 8 days after Hitler's birthday. Unfortunately, for everybody, not just the producers of Top Dog, but yes, including the producers of Top Dog, on April 19th, 1995, the day before Hitler's birthday, one of those real-life white supremacist terrorists, Timothy McVeigh, bombed a federal building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people. Understandably, after that, not very many people were in the mood to watch Chuck Norris and his pal Reno, the world's greatest police dog, chase down a gang of Nazis who were blowing up buildings in the context of a supposed action comedy. The bad timing of the theatrical release hurt a lot, but the movie was doomed anyway. The tone is confused, the villains are glaringly mismatched with everything else, and the attempted comedy is thoughtless and lead footed. Chuck Norris is not funny, is not trying to be funny, and is not depicted in a way so as to make him funny or to have funny things happen around him. The dog isn't even funny. It's not the dog's fault. I'm just saying. As with Sidekicks, Top Dog does benefit from a strong supporting cast of recognizable character actors. In addition to the already mentioned Carmine Caridi, there's Clyde Kusatsu as Wilder's boss, Kai Wolf as the leader of the neo-Nazis, and you might also recognize Timothy Bottoms in there as well. They all do their best with what they've been given, but their combined efforts aren't enough to elevate this leaden material or the stone-faced dead weight that is Chuck Norris. Both Sidekicks and Top Dog were directed by Chuck Norris's younger brother, Aaron Norris, who has made quite a career out of producing and/or directing his famous brother's projects. And you know what? Good for him. And good on Chuck for bringing his brother along. I got no problem with that. I do wish Aaron Norris was a better director, though, and had a better eye for material that suited the extremely limited acting talents of his big brother. I'm still baffled that anybody, brother or not, thought Chuck Norris, at this stage in his career, with 2 decades worth of film work documenting his profound lack of range, timing, and charm, should be doing comedy. It's like looking at a heavy steel-toed boot and thinking, that should be doing comedy. You know, now that I've plugged these 2 holes in my personal, nearly lifelong journey through the oeuvre of Chuck Norris, I think I'm good for a while. I'm sure for nostalgia's sake, I'll watch Firewalker or one of the Delta Forces or Missing in Actions one of these days. Lone Wolf McQuade is never far from my trash-loving heart, but for now, having just watched and then reflected upon Sidekicks and Top Dog, Chuck Norris can wait. It's not like he's going anywhere. Too soon?